Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmett Lewis, and my co-host, Mikhail Christy Anson. How are things going, Mikhail?
They could be going a lot worse. I'm sitting here in the middle of the night and recording a podcast with you. The end. How about yourself?
I don't know. It could be worse. It could be, I don't know. How could it be worse? I'm sure it could come out a lot of ways it would be worse. It could be that just people following the news that they have announced the aliens exist, or Project Bluebeam is in effect. You can choose which one you want. So alien death rays from space could be impacting my life right now, or a new world order, government, something could be. Anyway, something could be worse. But, or it could just turn out to be an elaborate hoax. Who knows? The world needs a good new hoax, actually. There hasn't been any like good hoaxes lately, except if you're onto the coronavirus. But that's not really a hoax, but some people think they're like, oh, one, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is real. Like that level of hoax. Please give it to me. Or
yeah, we need more hoaxes.
Yeah. So before we go full Joe Rogan mode.
Yeah, it's the Schmalix Schmones podcast.
Here with Schmogan.
I mean, the Handstand Factory podcast is just like a lead up to our inevitable going off the deep end, fuck off, far out goddamn podcast where we discuss all the darkness. So it's coming to a podcast
by episode 200.
Soon.
We'll be like, yeah, we're on episode 200, guys. Handstands, what are that? Don't you know the Earth is flat? I heard, speaking of flat Earth, I've been on checking things out lately on these kind of conspiracy forums to get the thing on. So flat Earth, the ultimate proof the flat Earth doesn't exist is because someone somewhere would come up with a flat Earth tour where you go to the side of the Earth and set up a swing so you could take Instagram shots, you swinging off the edge of the Earth. Boom, the end. The Earth is not flat.
That would definitely be something.
Yeah.
No, but you know the ice wall around Antarctica, and like where was it? Like
swing out hang glider trips off the ice wall over the edge.
Like they're one of my favorite theories around it was that guy that all gas no brakes, or Andrew something, that guy who used to do all gas no brakes. When he interviewed in the Flat Earth conference, there was a guy that like talked about that, like the ice wall around the edge of the Earth, and that was really Antarctica, and that on the other side it was New Berlin, and that Hitler was cloned, and like he lived in New Berlin, which was on the other side of the ice wall, and then like he just kept on spinning from there, and like he cut out before you actually got to hear the depth of the theory. But yeah, like the cloned Hitler lives on the other side. It all makes sense. All makes complete sense.
Yeah, it makes I can see that. Isn't that the plot for Iron Sky 2? It's a great movie, by the way.
It's almost isn't Iron Sky on the moon?
Iron Sky is on the moon, but then Iron Sky 2 is like basically Journey to the Center of the Earth. But like, how to go? The pitches, like the company that pitches them for funding, their pitch for Iron Sky was Nazis on the moon, and then their pitch for Iron Sky was Hitler riding a dinosaur.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, pretty much the same stuff. But again, as usual, we have some non-conspiracy shit to speak about, didn't we?
I feel like, I think there's, just to wrap up the conspiracy thing, I think there is like a rule for podcasts, like people are familiar with Godwin's law. There has to be like the equivalent for podcasts, like the longer they run, the closer to conspiracy cast they all turn into. And then if it's two guys, it's conspiracy cast. If it's two girls, it turns into true crime. That is like the rules for some reason on podcasts. Anyway, let's wrap it up there. Someone should name that law, and then they can be famous on the internet for about 3 years. Anyway, today's episode in the Handstand cast on the topic of handstands is Apparatus, balancing on Apparatus, doing strange things on Apparatus, and all, it's one of those things. It's such a big topic. I don't think we'll actually be able to cover every single piece of Apparatus that has ever existed in circus and other kind of things. But
there's
Yeah, it's definitely one of these interesting things of like, you know, I suppose the most familiar place people would think if you're into handstands would be Keynes. Obviously, we'll cover them. And shout out to our expand program that teaches you and conditions you how to do them. But in general, they're kind of a staple of the handstand world. And I suppose I'd like to just talk about what makes a good set of canes for people looking to buy them or make them, more so than yeah, I can always talk a bit about the balance. I know we covered a bit before, but like it's one of those things. It's very easy to get bad canes and have canes that are ineffective for what they need to do. And one of the useful things about canes is they move in a way that your body can't move. They horizontally displace the contact point underneath you. And this kind of vibration that a cane is capable of, it kind of cancels out the noise. It's kind of like fixes the speed wobbles in your balance, and particularly useful for one arms and stuff like this, but obviously useful in two arms. And it's one of these things like it's getting the right steel or the right cane for you. And everyone has their own preference. But it can be quite common that you'll get canes that don't have this kind of wobble, particularly the ones that are made out of like those water pipe tubes.
Yeah, canes is like it's really dependent on the person, and yeah, like on how they're made and all of that. It's it's really easy to get really bad canes, and I've seen way too many of them. And I think understanding like understanding the purpose of canes or like of the specific canes that you want is integral to be able to get some canes that'll basically be, or canes that'll do what you want them to do. And you could either just like have what I call a glorified block, which is basically a cane which is so sturdy, like this, either the steel is so thick or the cane is so short that balancing on it is basically exactly the same as on a block. And that can be totally fine if all you want is to get used to balancing on a kind of a higher surface and getting kind of over the fear factor of doing handstands and something high and so on. But it's certainly not like it won't contribute in the way that like a pair of well done canes will, where that kind of noise cancelling, that kind of slowing down of the balancing sensation. Like a pair of kind of super sturdy, like 2.5 centimeter thick steel bars, like it's just not going to move at all unless they're like more than a meter long. So I mean, the canes in general need to be well made and within certain parameters to be, or certain measurements to be able to actually help you with balancing.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. Like, it's kind of interesting now, the world we're in, where it's possible to buy canes on the internet now. I know it sounds weird, but like when I was in circus school, it was just not possible to buy canes. Like there was no one selling them on the internet. You had to either go to a metalworker yourself, which would cost money. You basically had to just deal with what was there. And it's kind of funny where, like, you know, nowadays you can choose your hole spacing on your box or on your canes. Whereas like a lot of people would just be like, there was one set in circus school and they were spaced this way and that's all you had. Or there was the good set, which didn't wobble too much. And that was it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, this kind of thing that it's like now you're kind of in this abundant thing where it's like there's different canes and they have different thicknesses of steel and they have different attributes. So you could you don't have to suck it up. Well, you do a little bit, I suppose. And they're kind of cheap as well. Like you can get an okay set of canes now for about 200-300 quid, and they're good. Whereas before, like I remember in circus, I remember someone paying like 700-800 quid sterling as well, not even euros, to get a set of canes made, and they just weren't that nice to use. The steel was just too stiff, and they'd spend a lot of money. I remember actually one guy,
like the first canes that I ever made, I think I spent, what was it, over €1,000 getting them made, because like my first coach, like he was in Norway, and so I basically just took the steel parts to a metal, like I found a metal worker online, I called them, and then went over, showed them the parts, and like one I had them make a turning cane, or like kind of at least the steel pieces that are around the ball bearing for a turning cane, and it
Yeah.
was like it cost so much money. The canes are not great, and it's but it was such a, like, I mean, this is even just like a little more than 10 years ago, and like back then, like get a pair of canes was like an exotic tool, and like you couldn't get them just online. There was no information about handstand canes. Like it was more like hand balancing, like it was kind of reserved to the circus, and
Yeah.
to kind of the people in that trade. So and nowadays it's interesting also, like, I mean, we're going to get more into that as we move on to the podcast, but like if you look at the kind of the history on these things, like, because these pieces of equipment have been a lot around for a very long time, and if you look backwards, like toward like old school circus, there were so much like part of the creation of an act was coming
Yeah.
up with new types of apparatus and instruments that you could balance on, and making them very specific. So there's so much like cool stuff that I'm sure that no one is using anymore, or even have thought of. And
Yeah.
like, now it's like there's coming out like, oh, like look at this special handstand equipment, and you're like, yeah, it actually was around 100 years ago. It's just it fell out of fashion. Kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's that one that some people might have seen, got in the ads on Instagram, of the guy who he's got the canes that kind of support you by around the elbow. They kind of look like a crutch on the ground. And, you know, maybe you've seen it, maybe hasn't, but it's kind of like, oh, it's coming out, something new. It's like, no, this is like, we had them when I was in Circle Media, which was what, like year 2001 or something, where it was like, oh, we called them the self-balancing canes because you could just balance on them. They do all the work, and it's like a cane where it's basically like a crutch. In fact, these ones were actually made from crutches that had been modified and welded a bit. And you'd put your hands through the hole, you'd hold the handles of the crutch, and you just lean against it, and it would balance you. And it's an interesting one because they had them in the school. There was another circus school in the same building as Circle Media called Circus Maniacs, and Circus Maniacs had, best name ever, especially like they had a similar program as Circle Media going, and the lady who ran it, who I can't remember the name off the top of my head, she came from a very trad circus background. She was full on trad, but decided to go teaching, which was a big thing of the day, because like trad, you're not meant to teach the secrets of trad circus to contemporary circus because fuck them, basically. Does that fight still even go on? But you know, there was a fight over like spilling the goods. And she would teach sway perch and all these things. Sway perch, if you don't know, it's a big pole that you balance on your shoulder or on your forehead, really big, and then someone will climb up it, and it kind of sways from side to side, and people do kind of like Chinese pole acts. You'd see it a lot in Chinese circus. You'd see it a lot in kind of old school Russians as well. They'd be pretty good at it. And you do it's one of these death-defying acts of watch this man do a headstand on top of a pole that's 8 meters tall, balanced by his flyer on his forehead. And they generally would have, you can find this in some of these acts, they'd have these kind of auto-balancing canes on top of the sway perch, so the person could be up there and balancing. It's almost the handstand equivalent of a safety line on a tightrope.
I actually have a picture of that kind of thing on my computer here right now, like a really old one from some stadium where there's a couple of guys up, like they're I don't know how high this is, but they could be like 30 meters or so.
Yeah.
And they're like basically leaning onto these. So it's essentially kind of a pseudo handstand in one sense, or kind of similar to that, to another like kind of ridiculous tool I've seen around kind of on social media, which is this, I don't remember what it's called, but it's some sort of, it's supposed to be a handstand or inversion training tool where you kind of put your shoulders through or on top of something, and your head kind of goes through the object, and then you basically are doing some sort of shoulder stand on a chair with a hole in.
It kind of looks like a toilet, that thing.
Yeah,
They're kind
yeah,
of like,
exactly. It's like, yeah, that's what it is. You just stuff your head in the toilet. So you can get the same shit done at home without buying the thing.
you don't need a
Like,
device, just drain your toilet out. Hope you don't
yeah, it's
gas yourself on the sewer gas.
yeah, yeah. So that is a absolutely glorious idea. I want to see that.
Yeah,
Like, or
I
actually,
think.
I haven't seen that. So I saw someone in circus school that there was like a toilet that they had like a loose one that wasn't connected. That they did some sort of like head in the toilet balancing
Yeah,
shit once.
I've seen, yeah, that kind of chair. In fairness, is pretty good if people like have neck issues and want to work on the handstand skills in yoga. To give it its credit, but when it's billed as a handstand trainer, that's when it's
Yeah.
a no basically.
Yeah, and like then there is this glorious one, which we are going to buy and take the piss out of at some point, Emmett. I can't remember its name, but I have
I know the
saved a
thing you sent me. Yeah,
screenshot of it. Yeah, of some sort of hideous. It looks like some sort of torture station of a fucking massive contraption where you strap yourself in onto a board that's attached to a frame, and that board can rotate. So when you're attached to the board, you basically lean backwards and then that flips you upside down. That's somehow going to help you to learn a handstand. And I mean, to me, it looks like I'd need to spend a long time finding an analogy that is bad enough to be able to compare with that fucking thing because it is hideous.
yeah,
But yeah, holy shit.
yeah. That
There's a
table is
lot
kind of
of
like, for
lot of
people who are
nonsense out
familiar,
there.
it's like an inversion table, like for tractioning out your back, but one that's been modified that you can go fully upside down. It's kind of.
Mm.
I wonder, like, would you get stuck there? That's one of the things I'm worried about because I was looking at like a lot of inversion tables. They kind of handles that are placed strategically that you can kind of pull yourself up out if you can't tilt it. Whereas this one had no handles, and you're strapped in quite intensely. So you could just end up like man dies in handstand from like blood pooling in his brain. And
It definitely it didn't look particularly well constructed in any way, shape, or form. So I wouldn't be surprised if that one is a death trap, basically.
yeah,
But I was thinking like in terms of actual equipment again, and like just to revisit the idea of the cane, which is maybe the most kind of popular tool out there nowadays, obviously, since it's kind of the go-to performance thing. It is useful for learning, and like in the kind of elitist internet circles, it's like canes have even gotten a little bit of a bad rep because it is easier on the cane. So you have all the dude bros who are learning handstands, and they're like, "Well, actually, it's easier on the cane, so I only do floor," which is like, I mean, I get the sentiment because it
yeah,
does kind of take, like, it can take away from your learning process in the sense that if you only use canes, yeah, well, you're going to not be able to practice everywhere because you'll be dependent on having your canes to train. Whereas if you learn on floor, or ideally you learn on floor and block and cane, and you learn to use all three tools, then you have a lot more options in terms of your scaling your learning as well.
yeah.
Um,
I think like one of the things I like people using canes for is just basically it gives you access to some of the higher skills or higher abilities, even just endurance
yep.
before you can. So you can get a chance of like, it's basically sub max training for the balance system. You're not pushing it to the limit. So you actually have a bit more space, and yeah, there's just a bit more space and time in there to actually kind of work on body positioning, the other kind of things that go into without suddenly dying because your fingers bit the dust. And it's very, I think they're useful. Like it's one of those things, they're definitely useful, and you know, people get on and really enjoy them and they become the main practice. And that's not really a problem. But even just as an adjunct to training, and like if everything is done to the max, you know, basically if you're bottlenecking your training with just your fingers or your shoulder positioning or your elbow or something, but then you could actually remove that or give yourself like a power up. Cane is basically a power up. You take the mushroom, you get bigger, you're able to do some more impressive stuff. You can work on your things. Then when you go to learn it on the floor, you're not just like losing time going, how do I transition to a flag from a straddle, or how do I transition to a figa from a straddle? when you've already sort of worked on it a bit on a cane. So then there's just like less hesitancy and less like, where the hell do I go with this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly useful, and of course, there's lots of kind of performance benefits for it. And yeah, like I remember one thing that didn't actually strike me until I'd performed for several years in terms of canes is just how an audience is seated in very many venues. So I was rehearsing, and then the director came in and he's like, "Yeah, but we need to put you up on something." Like he introduced a chair into my act, like this really tall chair that I would do a solder and a one arm on, and he just said like, "Yeah, the reason is like, yeah, back here they can't see you." He said just casually, and I was like, "Oh shit, yeah, that's true." It makes tons of sense that like in many of these types of because loads of circus goes quite high up as well. I mean, and like contortionists use podiums and so on, because ultimately, if people don't see what the hell you're doing, then you are kind of wasting quite a lot of time. So they were useful for that. And yeah, like you said, like you can like I'm using canes quite a lot now for my shoulder, because like I can actually train like some of like the most difficult positions then on the cane without too much trouble, whereas on the floor I'll fall out too often because my shoulder isn't ready for it. So it's certainly useful. And what was it but like in relation to being able to train on the ground, like a friend of mine asked me like, yeah, but like what do you think about only training on canes? And I paraphrased Star Wars to him and said that like canes is good, but if you only train it will forever dominate your destiny, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice. So you need to get your floor in if you just want to be able to reap the rewards of strengthening your balancing maximally, in terms of, because there is like a sense of power or strength in the shoulder that is much more demanding when you're doing ground or block. And it's not a kind of super ruffian strength, but it's like the precision needs to be high, and you need to fire very fast when you do ground particularly. So it's just useful to at least be able to do it. But yeah, canes are good. They also give you confidence on doing things up high, and yeah, it's a brilliant tool in so many ways.
Yeah, cool. So that's us pimping canes. But I'd like to just talk about balancing on random apparatus and other stuff we've seen as a kind of topic, because it's gonna, once again, I feel it's like it's one of these weird things that it is on. You see it a lot in viral videos lately, where you see kind of people from the kind of calisthenics side of things and strength training side of things are doing balances on weird things, generally sets of dumbbells and other stuff. And it's kind of it's kind of one of those things. Like it's interesting to watch, but it's kind of like there is a bit of a lineage here of like death-defying handstands on things that are not meant to be done on handstands, I suppose, or not meant to be used that way. I suppose in the circus world we have like the classic thing of chair balancing is one of these kind of things where like
chair stacking is one of like the old school kind of favorites. And like I remember, like you can find like so many like old school pictures of various chair stacking acts. If you want to see maybe the most impressive one ever, you can check out the one of Zhang Gongli from I don't know if I pronounce that correctly, Chinese acrobats that did, I think he did, was it Dema, like super long time ago, and he did like, I think it was 12 chairs up, and he did like 1 cane up there, and he had no launch. So it is absolute madness.
I seen this,
but
what do you call it? I seen this Chinese act. Speaking of Chinese, it's always the Chinese, where they had this chair stack act, where there's a chair handstand where you look, it's kind of like shoulder stand on one side, handstand on the other side. And they had kind of, you have to imagine kind of how to describe it? A rainbow of chairs. So they're stacking more and more chairs on top of each other, going out to the side, and using the weight of the
Ah,
acrobats to pin
yes.
them all together. And they had about 10 girls going from like adult to probably about like six, going out getting smaller and smaller chairs on this more and more precarious thing. And that was
I've s-
like that shoulder, like the shoulder handstand stuff on chair. It's pretty easy to do. Like it's pretty easy to press up to. Even if you can't L sit press, if you can floor press, you'll probably be able to get it.
yeah.
Or yeah, but yeah, they in terms of that, but in terms of like having so many of them coordinated on it, fuck, it
Mm.
was pretty good.
I think I've seen that clip, or like I have some memory at least of some like kind of the chairs kind of go out on a diagonal with people on them. Um, but yeah, like there's like the regular chair stand is kind of a funny handstand because it's one of the easiest ones since one of your arms are very close to your body and like in a kind of shoulder stand type of position, and the other is straight. So you have a lot of like force to work with, and it's very sturdy and stable, that arm positioning. So it's a very useful kind of like in terms of impressiveness because you have such great stability with
Yeah,
that bent arm. But I was also thinking of, like, I mean, of course you have parallel bars and like the kind of gymnastics tools for handstand, such as like the kind of the straight bar handstand where you do it both in kind of a normal and kind of reverse grip, which you barely ever see that among hand balancers, but like tons of it in gymnastics and in like calisthenics. I see they of course
yeah,
do a lot of that, even the single bar handstands. And it's kind of cool to see in there because I've seen some pretty legit one arms both on the parallel bars, which is doable but hard. But I've also seen some people do it in coming in from kind of a single bar handstand. So they basically like
okay,
control in the wrist in that direction, and that's pretty fucked up. Like
yeah.
I've never tried that.
I can't even picture how that would work.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, just the vice grip
Yeah, so
basically.
picture is just like literally, I can do one arm chin ups for reps with weight. I can probably just
Yeah,
crush the bar and hold yourself there. But
yeah.
yeah,
Pretty nuts.
yeah, it's kind of one of these things. Like I suppose, yeah, it's like this is the kind of thing I have my brain flooding with all the different things people do handstands on or have done that I've seen over the years now. It's kind of
Mm.
like, yeah, we have a they. I suppose you could categorize them into two main categories: stable and unstable. So we have like in the gymnastics world, parallel bars and bars as we've spoken, but then we have rings which are unstable. They have very different balance demands.
Yeah.
And then we also obviously have our friend the Mr. Bosu ball, which is
Oh yes.
kind of an interesting one. And then we also
Yeah.
have the classic roller bola.
Yeah. Yeah. Rollerbola is a huge one. Like there was this viral clip like a year or two ago of a guy doing like a back handspring and just like fucking sticking a handstand on, or like basically a back handspring to a handstand on a rollerbola board,
Yeah.
and he just fucking nails it. It just looks insane. It's like I've seen one arms on rollerbolas too. Like it's obviously pretty fucking hard, but doable. And it's like one thing I find interesting, and
I
in terms of
seen a Chinese, sorry to cut over here, so I remember. I seen a Chinese act that was someone doing a handstand with a flat board, a handstand board, not a flat board, a handstand board on top of their feet, and then another person climbed up them and done a handstand on a roller bola on top of that flat board, on top of the person doing a handstand on a roller bola.
that's fucked up shit.
Yeah, that's high tier fuckery, as we will call it in the business.
Yeah, like it's there's so much like um like just things that of course people have come up with this. But I remember when I got into handstands, and I think for the most part, for people who don't understand kind of the how it in the end becomes like standing on your feet. So I remember when I saw turning one arm for the first time, I was like, "What the fuck is this? This is impossible. Like, how can he stand on one arm and rotate? Like, this is like, this must be like one of the hardest things that exist." I thought, and then you learn to do a turning one arm, and you're just like, "Oh, yeah, okay, that wasn't that big of a deal." And it becomes the same. Like, oh shit, he did the one arm on the ball. Oh my god! I think the first person I ever saw like on internet to do that was Sami Dinin. He did like kick directly into Svitska on the Bosu ball.
Yeah.
And I asked him like, "Yeah, how hard is that?" And he's like, "Yeah, like it's like you just need to put your hand on the very like right place on the Bosu ball, or else it fucks you and just sends you off, and it's not great for your wrist." And he was right. Like, I tried it, and it's interestingly enough, like you hit the right spot there, and the Bosu ball kind of helps you, similar to a cane to a degree. But it's funny, like with a modern age, like you say, with like Instagram, and with like balancing on a bunch of dumbbells, or like on a Bosu ball, like it seems again like this impossible, like, whoa, he's on his hands and he's doing the Bosu ball, this is crazy. Whereas to someone who's experienced on their hands, like the change isn't drastic at all. But one other thing that I saw here, which that's I think is legit really impressive, like there's some guy that is doing tons of these things where he's walking on his hands on dumbbells that roll.
Yeah, I was thinking that guy as well. That was definitely like all those big dumbbell stacks, like people are doing the really high stuff and other stuff. It's cool and all, but it's just like with some of the shit I've seen in circus, it's just I've seen so much like insaner shit in circus. But the dumbbell rolling guy switching from dumbbell to dumbbell, that was awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. Yeah, it's very unique and like a really good idea. And of course, he's really fucking good at it. He's doing like loads of like handstand push-ups as well on the bar as it rolls. It's like it's pretty damn impressive. And of course, you have those guys. I mean, kind of older classic thing, but like the roller skates on hands.
Yeah.
The guy doing jumps and stuff like. There's like tons of that stuff, and Rodney Mullen with like the handstands on the skateboard, like he would do kind of the brief one arm thing where he would do like a one arm snap kick down, or like Corbett from one arm to then flipping the board and doing magic basically.
Yeah.
But there's tons of like just these various things. Essentially, it is like standing on your feet, and you can basically stand on your feet on a very large number of things. It's just with handstands, you can make that seem really impressive and epic.
Yeah. I'm even just thinking about like some of the classic ones in, I suppose if I remember this right, the history of this would have come from Violetta and Alexander Kiss from Russia, where they had canes and different apparatus in their show, where they'd go up on a big hydraulics riser and they'd be doing stuff on it like rolla bola, and then suddenly your man would go up like 5-10 meters, or handstands on canes, and then suddenly the canes would get longer and all this kind of shit. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe someone needs to combine all this together into a Bosu ball telescoping cane. And then we obviously have like our buddy Encho. Is it Encho or Enzo?
Yeah, Encho, I think, was the way it was.
The world's most stacked hand balancer.
He was sauced up on Cirque du Mans. No, wait, it wasn't the Mans, it was Monte Carlo.
No, we have to have like, we can't for completeness, we can't say he's sauced us. We just have to have a round of natty or not.
Yeah, yeah, the circus natty or not.
Yeah,
just start pushing like real bad vibes. but one funny apparatus though that like needs to be mentioned. It's the fucking glove, the one finger handstand,
the mystery glove.
Occasionally see. Yeah, you'll see loads of pictures of like old school, and you'll have some people defending it to the death. No, but she's so strong, she could do it on one finger. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean it's impossible. And it's like, why is she wearing the glove? No, yeah, I've seen one of those gloves. I know how it works, but that doesn't matter because it's the internet and I can't be right. Yeah, those are pretty cool. Like, I have a friend of mine. He did something similar. So, like, basically, to explain what I'm talking about, like, whenever you see people do the one finger handstand, they always wear a glove, and that glove is essentially a kind of a pseudo cane. That is fixed and stable, of course, so that like there is a little kind of cane piece coming out through that finger part, so that you're holding this little kind of weird handle as you're balancing on it. And it's not very comfortable, but it's certainly not a one finger handstand.
Just to throw it out, because we're speaking of apparatus and other stuff, there is a classic photo, and I can't remember where. I think it was in Karl-Heinz Zeiten book. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. He's a circus historian, of someone doing a one finger handstand on a slack line while spinning hoops on their legs. And this person would perform that skill, and he was not wearing a glove.
Are you sure?
I'm 100% certain, because the photo that's on the page beforehand, it shows someone doing the one finger in a bottle version with the glove on, and he talks about going like, now a lot of people would say that he's using a gimmick, and the glove is a gimmick. Gimmick is the technical term for these kind of things to make something easier. And then on the next page it goes on, it can be basically undisputed that this guy is definitely not using a gimmick.
Because I do have a picture also, again, on my computer here, of a guy doing like one finger on a slack rope, but you can't see whether or not he's wearing a glove on that one.
This photo, it's not from inside a tent, it's from outside the tent in the practice area. And photo's black and white.
We need to source up these pictures.
I need to find out. Yeah, I gave that book to someone many years ago, but I'm sure we can track it down or figure it out. He might be an interesting person to get on the podcast.
Yeah, circus historian. That would definitely be something. That we should definitely.
Yeah, he's mainly juggling and German variety. But
yeah, there's loads of action in those circles, no doubt about it. But yeah, I was thinking of another kind of apparatus thing. Because when you mentioned the crutches, I mean, you do have, of course, the guy that we linked in the previous podcast, the Chinese guy who jumps up and down the stairs on one crutch. But there is another like video. I've only seen a few clips of that, but the people doing handstands on crutches with ice skates on the bottom on ice, and like there is a video of like, that's probably still on YouTube, of a guy doing like he's on ice skates. He has these crutches with ice skates on them. He skates across the ice. He jumps into a handstand, does a one arm, and he lowers to a fucking crocodile on one arm while he's sliding on one single crutch. And that is just absolutely absurd, because even though he does have that kind of crutch support, and just like when you come down on a crocodile, if anything is just slightly off, everything will go wrong. If you're on a fucking crutch ice skating at like a million
I just found the act.
Absolutely batshit.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I found it. We'll include it in the show notes. Yeah, this guy Vitali from 2012.
It's Vitali Kalinin, isn't it? Yes, it's him. Yes, that's the guy. I remember, like, he was actually one of the first hand balancers I found on YouTube when I started. Like, there was barely anyone having like much stuff on YouTube back then that wasn't like Cirque du Soleil performances.
Just looking on here.
I remember I found
one on the croc to finish. Yeah, that was good. Okay, I'll definitely stick that in the show notes. Check it out.
Yeah, it's pretty sketchy ass stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, the costume is.
But also like this.
Oh, geez, yeah, the choreography in this act. Oh my god. Okay, I have to banish that. The skills are amazing. The choreography
don't look. You will become blinded. But yeah, like, I mean, other like apparatus such as slack ropes are of course a great great example where you see a lot of those the girls in the studio in Kiev where
Ludmila
they're doing like
Soboleva.
yes, like all of the one arms on like one arm kick up on the slack rope, spinning fucking hoops and whatnot, or like like also of course the like handstands on bikes and handstands on unicycles and all of that stuff is also like it's basically endless, all of the kind of crap that people have bothered to stand on. I'm just fascinated as to like how far people have taken it, and maybe primarily like what have been done like hundreds of times that we haven't seen at all.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. Is like it'd be, particularly say in the vaudeville era and the kind of more variety show era, when everyone was trying to be unique, but no one was really, what the hell were they doing? Handstands on glass. I've seen that before. Handstands on broken bottles. That's a classic one. Yeah, handstands on I've done this one myself actually. Handstands on a bed of nails. For some people who don't know, I used to perform a bed of nails act. That's actually that one's simple physics.
I didn't know either.
Surprise. The hardest bit of the bed of nails act, I'll tell you right now, is getting a board, then drilling every single hole in it to put the nails through. Because if you put that many nails through a board just with a hammer, it'll split. So you have to pre-drill the holes. That's the hardest bit of the act. Everything else is just, I'm on a bed of nails and physics dictates it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
So there you go. But doing handstand on it is not actually that difficult.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Other things like, I mean, trying to think about like various things that I've seen through the ages.
Okay.
And,
Let me pose you a question. Yeah. We're obviously getting into cool things to do handstands on. What's the stupidest thing you've seen a handstand on?
The stupidest thing I've seen a handstand on.
You don't have to name names.
That's a hard one. I'm actually not sure. I mean, I've like artistically, I've seen a lot of really bad choices. I mean, like Keynes, there mushrooms, or I mean, like just there's stuff that is disguised as something else. That is something I'm generally not that big of a fan of. Like you're just like, hey, look at this. Now I'm doing a handstand on a fucking something that just like tries to resemble a different object.
Yeah.
But yeah, I need to think a bit to if I'm gonna come or like, yeah, what can that be?
Okay, I've got one in terms of technical circus terms. So there was, I can't remember the guy's name, but I know one of the agents used to try and book him, and he was pretty good at handstands, pretty good straps, not amazing, but pretty good. And he had his whole thing was like living art. It was art that was living. Awesome, good idea. But he had his handstand act was someone made a sculpture, and this thing was fucking huge and heavy and just metal welded into the thing. Now, when I'm talking huge, I'm talking about it. It needed a 4x5 meter stage to set up on. So just to put that into terms for Americans, it's pretty big. And it was up about 3 or 4 meters high, and it was kind of like a climbing frame, but like artistic and kind of hammered metal. And it wasn't pipe, so it wasn't like it was solid. And the thing like weighed about 2 tons. So to book his act, you also had to like book a truck, like a proper articulated lorry, to come pick the thing up, and then he'd do his act, and then have a forklift on thing, and hopefully a stage door big enough to get the thing through because it didn't break down. And when posed the question, why don't you cut it up and get some bolts put into it so it can break down and be packed up? No, that would interfere with the art.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds a bit tedious, and sounds like someone who couldn't get that much work.
Yeah, see the thing is like,
but yeah, like just
your man, like in terms of skills, in terms of look, like his this was probably just going back, whatever, a long time now. How old I am? It's going back quite a lot. Where time ago, and his web presence, his branding, his photos, his videos at the time, everything was on point. It was well done in credit. So it was very visually interesting act. And the agent friend of mine would get a lot of inquiries going like, oh, this looks awesome. Can we book him? And then you're told like the constraints. Like, oh, no, we're not going to hire a truck to ship this from
Maybe
Europe
not.
to wherever. So that was the stupidest thing. Just for,
But-
yeah.
Yeah, like I remembered something now, though. It's
A bathtub of doom with a
it's
handstand
not.
on a wrench.
Yeah, the bathtub is glorious. I need to recreate that at some point. But I started thinking about the fucking dolphin. That bases a guy. That's kind of more hand to hand though. But like basically, it's a performing dolphin that is basing a switch guy traveling across the pool. And it's just kind of like on the nose of the dolphin, and it's just like the dolphin is upright and just like traveling across the pool, and the dude is just basically doing like a hand to hand style, one arm up there, just being neatly carried by the dolphin. I mean, it is like it's that is more kind of weird and ridiculous, and maybe not like the dumbest thing, but it's just
Yeah,
something
it's
that
definitely
I
out there.
remember right now.
It's definitely yeah. I don't know. There is something awesome
And
about that, but then there's also animal cruelty and dolphins in captivity, which is
yeah,
obviously a bit shit. So.
I'm definitely not into the animal circus. I mean, you also had like the monkey doing like a handstand on the horns of a goat that stands on a box on top of a tight wire or whatever the hell it was. I mean, or yeah, like the fucking bears doing handstand block walking and Washington trapeze and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, okay. It's interesting, but yeah, phase that stuff out, please.
Yeah.
It's past bedtime for that kind of circus for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately. We just have to wait long enough and it'll come back in fashion. But as these things do.
Yeah.
But yeah. Fuck that. But awesome.
Yeah, like
it's just one of those things
I
like
have a bit of
sorry.
yeah,
actually
the internet connection here.
Yeah. The stupidest, or another stupid thing I've seen someone do handstands on, just to wrap it up, was cans of beans. And they had a whole show that involved like a lot of handstands and tumblings on cans of beans and balancing on them. Basically, on the point was to make the cans burst open, and then they smeared themselves with the beans to finish their act in a very erotic manner that you can get with baked beans. Heinz baked beans, of course, not like your commoner garden variety Aldi or Lidl special beans. But no, it had to be Heinz because they're the only cans that would last the duration of the act, which was about 20-25 minutes.
I mean, one thing I did for handstand blocks once was like that kind of like, at least in Scandinavia, I guess in most countries they have that, but like coffee that comes in those kind of shrink wrapped, or not shrink wrapped, but like it's basically packed in plastic and it's super tight and it's just like handstand block shaped. So I remember I was doing some press training once on 2 packs of coffee. That was pretty fucking dumb, actually. I think one of them broke as well, like kind of just like burst. Like it didn't spill much, but like it just like kind of, and then like it was suddenly all soft and shitty, and I couldn't really continue that and had to go to the floor. So that's also up there.
I think, basically, I'm just going to take this moment because you're talking about doing handstands and coffee to pimp our bias of coffee. If you want to buy us a coffee on that one and support the podcast and coffee things, everyone who has done it already and bought us a bit of coffee, awesome. Thank you so much. We're actually saving the money up for me and Mikhail in person. Mikhail, you don't know this actually, but we came up with this plan a while ago, and we're just going to buy all the coffee we can in one go. And then just, I don't know, rub ourselves with coffee on our OnlyFans or something.
Okay, so this is like the the newest venture of Handstand Factory I haven't heard about.
Yeah, it's our latest
Interesting.
venture. Maybe not Handstand Factory. It's Handstandcast OnlyFans. We have an OnlyFans, by the way. If you can find it and subscribe, that would be amazing. We don't actually, but if there's
Yeah,
a
that would be news for me too. It's like I went to Turkey for a while, and then it's like, yeah, suddenly we have an OnlyFans. It's like, what's going
Mikhail's
on?
been in Turkey.
What
He's
have
getting
you
a
done,
tan.
Emmett?
Mikhail's been in Turkey. He's getting a tan. He's getting a hair transplant. Not on his head hair because that's fine, but on his chest hair because hair is back in. I hear. So yeah, that's our plan. If there's calls for an OnlyFans, if people would be into it, let us know. Maybe we'll do it.
Oh my god. That is one of the last things I'd ever do. I'd balance on all the stupid things in the world before I'd fucking do that.
Well, like
Jesus
there's,
Christ.
we don't have to do nudity or sexy stuff. We could literally just have you balancing on weird stuff and take requests. I'm sure someone would be into it.
Yeah, that's the problem. Someone would be really into it.
Watch as Mikhail does handstands on a carton of milk. Ooh.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Like, people are into a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, like all this apparatus and all things you can balance on. I mean, ultimately it adds to the fun to be able to balance on a bunch of different things. And yeah, it teaches you about various components of the balance and having to handle it in different ways, such as with something underneath you that moves. Now I know one of the most dumb things is those fucking springs. Have you seen those? The blocks with the springs on that just like they confuse me. I just don't understand what they're actually supposed to
It's kind of
do.
like the argument I've heard from them is that they help teach balancing handstands on rings or give a similar taste to it. I just don't think they move a lot. Now, I don't know if anyone's seen these things, but there's have you seen those? They're like half a sphere with like a handle on them.
Yeah, those as well.
Yeah, like they're
Those
actually
are
pretty
strange.
close to rings when you use them. They do have they don't have enough like forward and backward swing and open close motion of the shoulder, but they do replicate a lot of the feeling you get on rings, oddly enough.
Mm.
But the spring ones
they-
are just
lots
like,
of wobble.
no, they don't really, yeah. You know what? I'm just going to throw a challenge out there for people. I haven't seen this, but I think it might be awesome. Carbon fiber canes.
Carbon fiber canes.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone make literally I want to see a full set of canes made out of carbon fiber. Maybe just hand pieces. But like in theory, it must be possible to get stiff enough carbon fiber to do it all.
Yeah, but like I don't know how carbon fiber moves or like responds to stress, because I mean, you'd essentially want something that bends rather than breaks. I'd assume like aluminum canes wouldn't be a particularly good idea in terms of how it responds to stress, particularly kind of in the lateral dimension.
Yeah,
where, I mean,
I think on my
I know like a friend of mine, he did.
Sorry, go on.
What did you say?
I was just saying, as far as I understand it on carbon fiber, is the fabric type, the direction of the weave contributes to its stability.
Mm.
So you should be able to pick a weave that will give you a wobble in the right direction. Obviously, I know less than fuck all about carbon fiber than watching YouTube tutorials on these things. So, someone make them and then I'll sponsor them.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, I'd be very keen to see it anyway if you did. And yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I think we should wrap it up there.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's kind of one of those things. We're just going to go down a trip down memory lane. You remember that time that guy done a handstand on a skateboard and creased it? I do remember that one. It's pretty funny. And everything else you can. But other than that, yeah. So just basically an overview of doing handstands on things or more things we've seen this week. Other than that, if you want to ask us any questions or send it in to @Handstand Factory on Instagram. Other than that, yeah, we will catch you next week, hopefully.
Cheers.
Cheers.
The Handstandcast is brought to you by Handstand Factory and is produced by Motion Impulse. Thanks for tuning in. You can find a full transcript of each episode along with the show notes and any relevant references on handstandfactory.com/podcast. Thanks to Isaac for editing and Jordan for transcriptions. Music by Daniel Horwath. If you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee on buymeacoffee.com or consider starting one of our Handstand Factory online programs. Links are in the show notes.